Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure and a privilege to be addressing you, even if it is at the end of the day, and I know that you probably are thinking about when can you leave this room. So I'm always scared to be one of the last people to speak. Before I begin, I would like to tell you just a bit about myself and about the Bianca Jagger Human Rights Foundation, because beside being a Goodwill Ambassador from the Council of Europe, I am the founder and chair of the Bianca Jagger Human Rights Foundation. I was born in Nicaragua and spent my childhood and adolescence under the brutal and repressive dictatorship of the Somoza regime. And I learned firsthand the meaning of oppression and social and economic injustice. I left Nicaragua with a scholarship to study political science in Paris. I established the Bianca Jagger Human Rights Foundation in 2007. The foundation is dedicated to defending human rights and social justice, achieving peace, tackling climate change, and advocating for a sustainable future. The foundation objective is to be a force for change, to highlight injustice and to shine a light on causes that require national and international attention. The Bianca Jagger Human Rights Foundation is dedicated to protecting the rights of present and future generations. You may wonder why a human rights advocate has been asked to deliver one of these speeches this evening at this PARADISO conference, focused on technology and societal development. In fact, I'm a great believer that the World Wide Web is invaluable to human rights and humanitarian causes. The Internet is a powerful tool that gives a voice to people in remote places. It also plays a vital role in the dissemination of information and raising awareness. The information and communication technologies are invaluable to my work, and I will not be able to accomplish half of what I do were it not for the Internet. Electronic databases, broadband, Skype, Google Voice, and Gmail, among others. Every day, in the course of a day of my work, I communicate with hundreds of individuals and organizations, large and small, local and far-flung. These technologies make my job possible because they are the only cost-effective way to communicate with people in remote areas of the world, in war-torn and disaster-ridden countries. I use the Internet and social networking sites as Facebook and Twitter on a daily basis to publicize the causes that I support. The Internet has democratized information, and Skype, Hotmail, Gmail, Google Voice, and other similar outlets have liberated communication, have made it possible for people who cannot afford the huge prices of phone calls to be able to call people far away in other parts of the world. In my speech entitled A New Path to Growth and Prosperity, I will attempt to demonstrate that business as usual is simply not an option and call for a paradigm shift. I know that we have some of the same words, but we have never spoken together, that moves beyond GDP. I will discuss some of the key challenges we are facing in our world today and will look at the role that ICT can play in addressing environmental concerns, the Millennium Development Goals, and in building a more sustainable future. Last, I will address ICT negative impact and call for legislations to regulate how ICT are produced and consumed. During the 20th century, the world experienced profound changes. In December of 1948, the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. For the first time, human, civil, cultural, economic, political, and social rights were recognized as belonging inherently to all people, rather than being a magnanimous gift bestowed upon them or denied to them by design, fate, or the whims of ruling regimes. In 1970, the UN General Assembly pledged that developing countries will commit 0.7% of their GDPs to official development assistance. And as you have seen, 10 years have passed, or 20 years have passed, and leaders have not yet come to do what is necessary and will certainly fail to achieve the Millennium Development Goals by 2015. It is evident that the world will fall short of this target. There are still 1.2 billion people living on less than $1 a day. Almost half of the world, over 3 billion people, live on less than $2.5 a day. Every day, 800 million people go hungry. And according to UNICEF, 22,000 children died every day, mostly from diseases that can easily be prevented or treated. And what never before has humanity been so overwhelmed by such a massive and urgent concern: explosive populations growth, climate chaos, and economic crisis. The world population currently stands at 6.9 billion people and is forecast to reach 9.5 billion people by 2050. This unprecedented growth rate has had far-reaching implications. Why is it that it is time to go beyond GDP? Lester Brown, founder and president of the Earth Policy Institute, stated, "We can decide to stay with business as usual and watch our modern economy decline and eventually collapse, or we can consciously move into a new path. Business as usual is simply not an option. To build a sustainable future, which is what I think you are trying to address here, we need a model of development that does not prioritize Western notions of profit and economic growth. It is time to move beyond GDP. The gross domestic product per capita has traditionally been the main indicator used to measure the progress of societies. It measures the economic value of goods and services produced by a country, but it doesn't measure other very important issues. Over the past few decades, other indices have been attempted to evaluate development in developing countries. In 1990, the Human Development Index was proposed by the UN with the inaugural issue of the Human Development Report to extend the way development is measured and take into account more than mere economic consideration. HDI is a composite index based on per capita GDP, life expectancy, literacy, and school enrollment. A number of sets of indicators of index have been put forward by research organizations, NGOs, and governments, advocating that it is time to move beyond GDP, to find new ways to drive and measure the progress of societies, particularly when taking into account the profound changes that society are now experiencing. Since the GDP measures are only the quality of market activity without counting for the social and ecological cost involved, it is both inadequate and misleading as a measure of true prosperity. Policymakers, economists, the media and the international agencies should cease using GDP as a measure of progress and publicly acknowledge its shortcomings. New indicators of progress are urgently needed to guide our society. The activities of what we have imposed on the developing countries with this level of development in terms of GDP is clearly inadequate and has adverse effect on the developing world. Developing countries striving to improve their economic growth have been forced to open the borders to foreign investment, often at the risk of severe environmental devastation. Growth-centered development has fueled the irrational exploitation of natural resources by multinational corporations. Their policies have been implemented in the names of growth and development. The mantra is maximum production, minimum cost, and open markets. In the pursuit for our planet's natural resources, they have destroyed ecosystems and marine habitats, wiped out precious biodiversities, fauna and flora, and endangered the livelihood of communities worldwide. They have caused some of the worst environmental disasters and human rights abuses happening in our world today, for the most part with total impunity. The Bianca Jagger Human Rights Foundation has been advocating critical reforms to our model of development, encompassing principles of justice, respect for human rights, good governance, accountability, environmental protection, and above all, sustainability. We urgently require a shift in our fundamental values. Development should take into account the needs and aspirations of all sectors of society. The new model of development must move away from our obsession from profits and growth and instead focus on sustainability. Today we stand at a crossroad in history. The warning from our most respected scientists are loud and clear, yet government leaders, according to are ignoring the scale of the threat of climate change. According to many scientists, we have less than a decade left to address the issue of climate change before we reach the tipping point or the point of no return. The Earth is perilous close to dramatic climate change that threaten to spiral our way out of control. The task now is to prevent catastrophic climate chaos. Failure to act effectively is likely to precipitate cataclysmic changes that may obliterate life on Earth. Time is running out. We must cut carbon emissions drastically and immediately to reduce the levels of CO2 in the atmosphere to 350 parts per million. It is really important, and even we now know that Professor Stern has revisited his initial estimate and has now said that he endorsed the 350 parts per million as a very sensible long-term target. Climate change presents us with extraordinary challenges, including food and water security, with new forecasts suggesting that half the world population could face climate-induced food crisis this century. Inevitably, most of those people will be from the developing world and who are the least equipped to deal with such challenges. Climate change is not just an environmental threat, but a critical human rights issue which impacts every aspect of our life: peace, security, poverty, hunger, health, mass migration, and economic. It is a global issue, and it calls for global action and solutions entrenched in an internationally legally binding framework. I will not speak to you about what I wanted to say, but just in passing, which is about the threat, another impending crisis. I don't know how much you have been following, but that is peak oil. Scientists have been predicting peak oil since 1956. Until recently, these prognostications have been perceived as distant threats or some sort of myth rather than an immediate risk. The latest warning has come from the Joint Operation Environmental Report from the US Joint Forces Command. And I listened to an admiral who came to speak at a conference that I was speaking in Washington. And I can tell you that to listen to him, this is not some NGO that could be accused of being some leftist who has some wild ideas about climate change or about peak oil. What the report says is by 2012, surplus oil production capacity could entirely disappear, and as early as 2015, the shortfall in output could reach nearly 10 million barrels. I recommend to you that you read this report. In addition to oil, our addiction to oil is dangerous and unsustainable. Our oil supply is finite, and the dwelling reserves simply cannot cope with our ever-increasing demand. Promoting renewable energy must now become a global and universal priority. Nothing is microeconomically more necessary, but ultimately cheaper than the conversion of our energy system from conventional energy to renewable energy. Given the scale of these impending disasters, we have no choice but to embark upon a new Copernican revolution. A key part of this revolution will be to replace carbon-driven economy with a renewable energy economy. The challenge we are facing now is how to switch to a more secure, lower carbon energy system that does not undermine economic and social development and addresses the threat of climate change, peak oil, energy security risk, and global inequality. I believe that information and communication technologies can play an invaluable role in our transition to a renewable energy economy and in building a more sustainable future. In the next part of my speech, I will look at some of the ways ICT has already transformed the world and how they can be used to help us address some of the issues we are facing today. In the last 20 years, ICT have changed the way people communicate, access information and knowledge, work, play, manage health and safety issues, produce wealth, govern, control energy, and protect the environment, or not protect the environment enough. In addition to playing a facilitating role in other sectors, ICT is a significant sector in its own right. According to the International Telecommunication Union, in 2009 report, it accounts for around 5% of global GDP and an even higher proportion of GDP growth. ICT also have important economic and social economic benefits, including those on a range of development goals. I would like to briefly share some ideas about the internet. There are around 1.966 billion internet users in the world today, accounting for 28.7% of the world's population. This figure is growing steadily. In 2005, there were only 16 million users worldwide, and as you can see, there's been a tremendous acceleration. Mobile phones this year, the number of mobile telephone subscribers worldwide has peaked at over 5 billion, over 70% of the total population. This is a rapid increase from last year, which saw only 4.6 billion subscriptions. But Ben Wood, mobile phone analyst at CCS Insight, said the mobile phone may be the most prolific consumer device on the planet. If you just take the UK in 1987, when the first mobile companies launched an industry inside it, predicted a maximum of 10,000 phones. 5 billion phones mean there are now more than 3 times as many phones as personal computers. This device has become a part of the fabric of our society. Whether a teenage girl taking a BlackBerry to bed with her, or a farmer in an African village, or a young agricultural worker in Nicaragua, it is changing their life. And then you have other companies like Skype, Google, Google Voice, and many others that have expanded to hundreds of millions of users in just a couple of years. Skype, at the end of the fourth quarter of 2009, had 560 million registered users. At peak time, 23 million users had logged into Skype. As of March 2010, Skype is available in 29 languages and is used in almost every country around the world. 35% of Skype users utilize it for business purposes. Recently, Gmail, as you probably all know, have launched Google Voice, a phone application where you are able to voice call other Gmail users from computer to computer, free of charge. And Facebook this year celebrated its 6th birthday with the extraordinary figure of over 500 million active users. This is up to 150 million from 2009. Over 50% of active users log on to Facebook in any given day, and over 200 million currently access Facebook through their mobile device. Twitter users are now sending 50 million tweets per day, which translate to an average of 600 tweets per second. Kevin Vale, member of the Twitter analytical team, notes that people were tweeting 2.5 million times a day around the beginning of 2009, up from 300,000 times in 2008. ICT have clearly expanded at an unprecedented rate and show no sign of slowing down. We don't know really what will happen by next year. Everything is changing so fast and at such an unexpected way. They have been invaluable to humanitarian and human rights campaigns, thanks to the diligence of organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and in a small way, mine. Many of the human rights travesties of the world are documented and posted in the websites for anyone to see. As I mentioned early on, I use Twitter and Facebook to draw attention to the causes I am supporting. This year, I was able to mobilize public opinion against Vedanta, India, a Vedanta who proposed a bauxite mine in Orissa, India, and was threatening the survival of an ancient tribe, the Kon. I joined forces with Amnesty International and ActionAid to campaign on their behalf. And early this year, I visited them, and their message was very clear. They asked me to carry back their message about their fear for their survival. No amount of financial reward or relocation packages can compensate for the loss of our livelihood and our sacred land. Please tell Vedanta that they do not want the mine to be built. I spearheaded a petition to the Indian Prime Minister and to the Chief Minister of Orissa. I did all that by internet, by using Facebook, by using Twitter, and every means as well. I wrote articles for Forbes India, The Observer in the UK, and the Huffington Post. But what I want to say is that such large campaigns were not possible before the internet age. The outcome was startling. Backing down of a multinational from a course of action which might have gone unreported outside of the local press. This place is a very remote place in Orissa, in India. Believe me, it was incredibly difficult to get there. Had it not been for all these means, we would have never been able to achieve what we did. In the end, the Minister of the Environment decided to deny clearance for Vedanta. ICT can also effectively support environmental objectives, allowing energy to be more efficiently managed, environment management system to be implemented, and transportations needed to be reduced. It is a critical tool in helping reduce global greenhouse gas emissions. At the PARADISO conference of January 2009, the International Communication Union estimated that ITC can help cut global greenhouse gas emissions by 15 to 40% by enabling intelligent transport system, smart buildings, and better supply chain management. Perhaps the next Paradiso conference will be done with me addressing you by video link rather than traveling here. It was fortunate that I was able to come by train rather than by plane. As far as developing countries are concerned, ICT have been recognized as an efficient way to help achieving the UN Millennium Development Goal and more generally to reduce poverty, but not enough is being done. In his study on the use of mobile phones in Africa, Leonard Weverman, professor and chair of economics at the London Business School, has demonstrated that at the macroeconomical level, every extra 10% increase in mobile teledensity in the developing world leads to an additional 0.59% point in GDP per capita, if that is what you want to measure what people advances are making. The importance of ICT cannot be measured only in economic terms. Mobile, telephony, email, electronic databases, and the internet had had a significant impact on all areas of our life, from our way of living and interacting to our access to knowledge, to our political choices. At the same time, we need to bear in mind some of the negative impacts of information and communication technologies. For example, as MS Reading notes, the production and use of ICT currently accounts for about 8% of electric power consumption in the EU. There is a strong need for legislation to regulate the implementation of ICT and for a framework that addresses the way technology are produced and consumed. There is also a need for a coordinated strategy to prevent negative impacts that ICT may have on economic and social issues. For example, the risk linked to an increased inequality between and among nations due to the digital divide. The digital divide is a really important issue that you need to address if you want to have a better future and if you are really concerned that what we are trying to do is a holistic approach to ICT. It is an intellectual illusion to believe that the crisis that besiege our world today can be compartmentalized. And perhaps you wonder why I talk to you about all of these issues. It's because I believe that all of these issues are related, are connected, and we cannot look at them separately. Population growth, climate change, food and water shortages will affect everyone, everywhere, in every nation, and from every socioeconomic group, in hundreds of ways. The time for further excuses for procrastination and prevarication has long passed. Now is the time for decision makers and leaders to take concrete steps to set us on a new path to growth and prosperity. We need to move beyond GDP. We can have prosperity without growth. And I will recommend to you that you read the book of Tim Jackson. Now is the time for courage and leadership, and for positive and immediate action if we want to ensure the survival of present and future generations and combat catastrophic climate change. The only long-term viable basis for economic activity is to replace fossil fuels with renewable energy. I believe that ICT can play an invaluable role. Thank you very much.